Hello, welcome to the Champion Faction, where I share my love of Stonemaier Games. I'm Jason Martin, and today I'm excited to bring to you my review of Apiary, the latest board game from Stonemaier Games. Now, this game is designed by first-time designer and longtime beekeeper Connie Vogelmann. I had the pleasure to interview Connie in October after Apiary had been announced, which you can watch on my channel. In the interview, Connie provided some great information about the real inspiration for the game, her beekeeping, which is her love of bees and beekeeping. She also talks about the design and development process of the game and many other topics related to Apiary and board gaming in general. So I strongly encourage you to head over to watch that video after watching my review. During the interview, I hadn't had a copy of the game, but now I do. So I've played Apiary, and at this point I've played a couple of multiplayer games, but I played the solo game at least 5 or 6 times. Now, before I give you my review of the game, I'll give you a brief interview of how the game works. Apiary is set in the far future when humans have died out and bees have evolved to become not only super intelligent, but they've also conquered interstellar space travel. While they've developed notable technologies and abilities, they still live in hives and still produce honey and wax, and they still hibernate. Wait, hibernate? Bees don't actually hibernate, do they? No, but for the sake of the game, they do, so let's just deal with it. Now, this is not going to be a full teach of the game. There are much better videos for teaching the rules of the game online. I would encourage you to check some of those out. But I did want to give you a brief overview of the game and how it works. In Apiary, players will be performing different actions to build the best hive and score the most points. You can see over here on the side, I have my hive mat, which also has a unique faction that gives me some starting resources, as well as a special ability, and says what my starting workers are. You can also only store as many resources as you have available spots. This shows where I can store at the beginning of the game. Throughout the game, I may be getting more farm tiles, which also add other storage abilities as well. So we're going to be taking actions, placing our workers, represented by these little worker bees here, and they have different levels. So they start out at a specific level as indicated by the faction tile, but then over the course of the game, as I pull them back or as they're bumped back to me, they will get leveled up all the way from 1 to 4. And when you place a level 4 worker somewhere on the board on any of the spaces, there's either an additional action or a much more powerful action that you're going to perform. So let's talk about the action spaces and what they do. There's explore, advance, convert, carve, grow, and research. Explore, you're going to be moving this queen ship around. So all the players are going to be moving it around on their turn when they take an explore action. And whatever tile they land on, if there's an explore token on it, they'll take that and get whatever benefits are on it. And then they will flip the tile over and reveal what that tile may have. So this is an example of a couple of different tiles that you might encounter in the game. And you'll see this little dotted box indicates that the player who lands on it can then place a resource, and then for the rest of the game, anybody who lands on that tile will get that resource. Here we have one where there's a water that's pre-printed and then 2 boxes, and so up to 2 more could be placed there. This also has a strength 4 benefit. And so this means that if somebody places a strength 4 worker on the explore action and then lands on this space, in addition to gaining whatever resources are here, they can also perform this benefit down at the bottom. So that's explore. Advance, you're going to place a worker, and then depending on the strength of the worker and how it combines with a second worker that might be there, or just this +1, you can choose from the different columns of tiles that you then will build and place on your hive mat. So we have farms, which as I mentioned earlier, allow you to store additional resources. They also provide income benefits when you retrieve your workers. So every level 1, 2, or 3 worker that you retrieve can trigger one of these farm benefits, income benefits. Recruit tiles are this second one, this second row, and these are ongoing benefit that whenever you perform a particular action or gain a particular thing, it gives you something else in addition to that. And then finally, we have the development tiles. These are just really powerful one-time benefits, and they also have the opportunity to possibly be more in in-game scoring. So for instance, this one says that you can take 3 face-up tiles, farm, recruit, or development, and add them to your reserve. Only you may build them, but it's worth 4 victory points at the end of the game, which is quite a lot for one of these tiles. And then we have convert, which is exactly what it sounds like. You're converting one set of resources or cards to something else. And you can do that however many times up to the level of worker. So if you place a level 1 worker on convert, you can only do 1 conversion. If you place a level 4, you can do 4 conversion. Also with level 4, if you place a level 4 worker here, you can do what's called teach a dance, which basically means that you take these tokens and you can search through them. You don't have to draw at random or anything. You can search through and find the ones that you want to use. So for instance, if I wanted to, I could place, let's say a 1 pollen and a fiber when I teach a dance. And so then I have the dance of pollen and fiber for knowledge. And basically that creates a new conversion so that I can trade in 1 pollen, 1 fiber, and gives me 2 victory points and a research card. And so that's another way to create that. Now, whenever you play this in the multiplayer game, you place your cube right here on that. And then for the rest of the game, anytime someone uses that conversion, another player, not you, but when another player uses that conversion, you get one along the Queen's favor track down here. In the solo game, however, the Automo is never going to use this. And so instead, whenever you teach a dance, you just automatically get 4 Queen's favor right off the bat. So that's convert. I'm going to skip carve for a moment. Grow, this is the space, the action space, where you will place a worker here to get bigger. I mean, to grow, literally. So one way is by paying a pollen and a 1 strength worker, you can get another worker. So because these workers will age up and eventually go into hibernation, you'll lose these workers. You definitely will want to go back to that spot to get more workers as the game progresses. This is also where you're going to go to get these frame tiles, or these frame pieces, I guess, that you can add to your hive map to basically allow you to place more tiles. And so you can go get those at grow as well. And if you place a strength 4 worker here, that also means that you can upgrade your faction. All factions have a basic ability and then an upgraded ability that usually provides you a more powerful version or more flexible version of that faction ability. And so you upgrade that by placing the 4 worker there. And then research is where you will be drawing these seed cards. Now, seed cards can be incredibly flexible because they can do a number of different things. At the very basic level, you see this icon up in the top corner. They can be used as any basic resource. So whenever you would need to spend a basic resource, which are water, pollen, and fiber. These are the 3 basic resources. There's also honey and wax. Those are a little bit more advanced resources. But if you need a basic resource and you don't have it, you can discard any card that's in your hand to substitute for one of those resources. So that can be really beneficial, but really where a lot of the benefit comes in is in these one-time special abilities. You discard the card and then you can do whatever it says in the top of that area. So this could be like pay any 1 basic resource to place a second worker. So you can basically place 2 workers on your turn. Let's see here. Pay a basic resource to plant a different seed card from your hand. So we'll get to what planting means in a second. And so recollect from 1 explore token. So from the explore action, you can recollect from one of them. So basically one of them that you've already gotten, you can get the benefit of that again. So the strength allows you to draw a certain number of cards, but you always just keep one. So if you place a level 4 worker there, you can draw 4, and then you choose which one of those 4 to keep. But also, in placing a level 4, it also lets you plant a card, and that's where the third use of these cards come in. If you plant a card, then you slide it underneath your mat, and then at the end game, you will get this in-game bonus points that are shown here on the card. So for this one is in-game 1 point per farm tile that you have. Here's another one, 1 point per resource that you have at the end of the game. 2 points per explore token. So lots of different in-game scoring abilities. So 6 points if you reach space 15 or higher on the Queen's Favor track down here. So you can either use this as a resource, use the special ability, and you discard it to use the special ability, or you can plant the seed card and get the in-game scoring bonuses. So that's research. And then the final place that you can go, we talked about explore, advance, convert, grow, research, and then we have carve. Now carve is special because you can only place a level 4 worker there. You can't place 1, 2, or 3. There is I think there are maybe a tile or 2 or maybe some cards that might allow you to break that rule. But as a rule, you only place a level 4 there. And then you pay honey to buy and build one of these carved tiles. And these are basically in-game scoring points. So for instance, this one, 12 points if you have 0 or 1 active worker. This one is 14 points if this is your only carved tile. So that's pretty good to get if that's the only one you're going to go for. And then finally, down here at the bottom, this isn't an action space, but whenever you were to upgrade, if you were to level up a level 4, well, you can't do that. Level 4 worker, they only go up to level 4. If you were to be in a situation, usually by retrieving or having this worker bump back to you where you would level up a 4, instead, it goes back to the pool. You'll have to get it again with the grow action, and then you place one of your hibernation tokens somewhere in the hibernation comb. Now on this is the 1 to 3 player board. There are more spots available here for 4 and 5 player game. But for the 1 to 3 player, it's any of these spots. And for the 2 player game, as well as the solo game, which is played like a 2 player, it's only this area or this area. So this area here is ignored. And that gives you a bonus. So you can get whatever is in this spot. It also will be an area majority for the end of the game. So whoever has the most here will get 3 points. Whoever has the most here will have 7 points. Second place getting 2 points. But also, this is the timer for the game. As soon as all of the available spots are filled in the hibernation comb, that triggers the end of the game. Everybody will get one final turn before in-game scoring, and then that's the end. Now, the solo game, as I mentioned a moment ago, plays just like a 2-player game. So it's just like a 2-player game. In fact, the solo player will play their game exactly as they would a 2-player game. The Automa, however, the solo opponent, does play a little bit differently. First of all, they're going to get 3, at the beginning of the game, they'll get 3 workers of gray and 3 workers of yellow. The values of those are dependent on which difficulty level you're playing. And then all of their turns will be dictated by what's on these cards. Another factor in the solo game is that whenever the Automa's workers were to hibernate, they still place a hibernation token down here, but they immediately get their worker back at either a strength 2 or 3. Depending on the difficulty level, they may come back at a strength 2, or they may come back to the Automa as a strength 3. Again, that depends on the difficulty level. And what that means is that the Automa is really good at upgrading their workers because they have 5 to work with. They never have to get more. They're constantly getting upgraded throughout the game. So they can end up getting these carved tiles really quickly, really easily. And that's something you have to really watch out for in the solo game. Now, it is no secret that Stonemaier Games loves worker placement games, and they may have the most games that use worker bumping. what makes that so interesting is that in most worker placement games, the workers block other players from going there, at least for the time being. That's how Stonemeier's first game, Viticulture, works. However, beginning with their second game, Euphoria, and continuing later with Charterstone and now Apiary, worker bumping means that none of the worker placement spots are restricted by other players. Instead, if you want to go to a spot that already has a worker on it, that worker simply gets bumped back to the player. In this game, in particular, the player then has the option of either leveling up their worker to make it more powerful and available to use on a future turn, or they can place it in what's called the landing area so that they can gain income benefit that would that it would generate on a retrieval turn. Now, that whole concept of worker bumping and leveling up creates a really interesting decision space for the player who might want to bump that worker, but might not because it's helpful for the other player. So at a stronger level, they're going to get that worker back and put them that much closer to hibernating. So while you're totally allowed to go anywhere, you may want to avoid certain spots that benefit your opponent by giving them a worker at a stronger level. And that's especially true in the solo game where the automa can very quickly and easily upgrade their workers and hibernate. They also don't have to get more workers each time because each of their workers automatically return to them at either a level 2 or 3, depending on difficulty, when they hibernate. So for anyone interested in worker placement games, this presents a really unique and interesting decision space, apart from simply what action or location do I want. Additionally, the fact that workers will eventually hibernate means that you may need to go back to the action that gives you more workers. In a lot of worker placement games, including Viticulture, once you have all the workers that you need, you can essentially avoid that space altogether, and it is essentially a dead space. Not so in Apiary. That grow space becomes important later on. Now, another important decision space is how to build the best foundation of points while controlling how many points your opponent is able to get. There are a lot of points to be gained in the tiles that you place on your hive, the seed cards, your income, the hibernation comb, the queen's favorite track, lots of different places to get points. In the solo game, the automa will get a lot of points, not all, but a lot from the carved tiles and potentially from explore tokens. So it's to your advantage to try to limit their ability to do that as best you can. So what do I think of the game overall? Well, first, let's start with the art and the production. As always, all of the artwork and components are as nice and as high quality as you can imagine. The art by Connie Vogelmann is very thematic and beautiful without being overwhelming or distracting from the game itself. The graphic design is simple and easy to understand, although there are a few times where the symbols that refer to active workers, available workers, and hibernating workers can sometimes be easily confused. So you have to look out for that. But for the most part, the iconography, the graphic design is very well done, as we've come to expect from pretty much every Stonemaier game. Now, about the theme. This is an unusual one. You don't really think of bees in space, but this blends kind of that science fiction space exploration with the natural world of bees. Now, we've had a number of games recently that have become popular dealing with bees, and there are innumerable science fiction spacefaring games. So why did this have to go together? Well, I think part of the answer is that it helps it stand out in a crowd of board games. It's not just another bee game or another sci-fi game. It's a sci-fi bee game, and that's unique. Also, as Connie Vogelmann has stated in her interview with me and elsewhere, placing the game in a science fiction space setting actually helped solve some design problems that would not have made as much sense in a natural or realistic bee setting, but works much better in science fiction. Personally, I also think it adds a little bit more whimsy and intrigue in a game that otherwise might not be there. So your mileage may vary, but I like the setting. Now, the game flow is very intuitive with very quick turns, but also the turns feel very satisfying. It's rare that I take a turn in this game where I don't feel like I did much of anything. Most of the time, players are placing workers and taking the subsequent actions, which feel good. But even the retrieval turns can feel pretty satisfying if you're activating a bunch of farm tiles for income. The specific faction that you play with can provide a small nudge in strategy from the beginning, but I find that as the game goes along, even having a specific strategy can result in many different options of actions to take. Now, for some players, this may lead to a little bit more analysis paralysis. After all, almost all of the worker placement spots are open to you each turn, so there are key decisions to make throughout the game, especially as the number of turns that you have left become fewer and fewer, and you can see the end game approaching. For some of the actions, there are a few rules to keep track of, but it's not overwhelming, and a lot of it makes thematic sense, so you can keep track of it pretty well. Most of the rules are also printed somewhere in view, either on cards, tiles, the board, or on the player aid. Now, as you would expect from the Automa Factory, the solo game is very swift and fulfilling. The Automa doesn't take actions in the same way the player does, but the interaction is enough to feel like a true two-player game without feeling overwhelming or time-consuming. The one frustration I have is that it feels way too easy for the Automa to gain those carved tiles. Those tiles are extremely valuable to the Automa, more so to the Automa than perhaps even the solo player. But because they never lose their workers, and they have 5 of them, they can level up those workers quick and get those carved tiles ridiculously fast and easily, much more so than a human player would in a 2-player game. That said, I think if the solo player has a good strategy for themselves that also incorporates mitigating somewhat the Automa's ability to get the explore tokens and the carved tiles, they can still win. Now, I've played the solo game at levels 2 and 3 and won at both levels, level 3 only once, so it can be done. You just have to counter the Automa strategy with a little bit of your own. So overall, I really like this game a lot. I think it will appeal to a lot of hardcore gamers that want something, not super crunchy, but challenging. But it's also accessible enough for non-gamers to be interested as well. There are a lot of good key decisions to make, but none of it feels overwhelming. Each turn can feel very rewarding, especially the turns with those very powerful level 4 workers. There's a lot of player interaction with the worker bumping and competing for different tiles and spots in the hibernation comb, but none of it really feels mean or punitive. I haven't decided exactly where this game will fit in my rankings of Stonemaier Games overall, but I think it's safe to say that it's at least around, if not in the top 5. One day I'll probably need to do a ranking of Stonemaier Games, but until then, this is a great game for worker placement lovers, for Stonemaier Games lovers, and lovers of Space Bees. I can't recommend it high enough. And until next time, I'm Jason Martin, and I'll be making my way to the factory as the champion faction. Bye.